Good afternoon, parties and colleagues in the room. We'll be resuming shortly for the breakout room. Theme 3, capacity building and knowledge share. Thanks for making it here. I guess some other colleagues will be joining shortly in the room. As we start, we have some constraint today based on time, so we'll try as much as possible to catch up on the time lost so far. So first we have two key guiding questions that, that would be that will be focusing on. But today we'll do some rounds around them. First, starting with the first question, and then we'll go to the second one, and we'll try to also carefully manage the time to ensure that everyone in the room who is willing to share their perspective on this is able to do so within the limited time that we have. So to begin, we will be taking the first question on how can capacity building and knowledge sharing initiatives under the nationally defined just energy transition pathways ensure that indigenous peoples and local communities are empowered as active partners with their cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and practices recognized, valued, and protected. I guess you probably have received this from the agenda document, but I could also repeat this if if you want me to, and if you've not got the question right. But I'll just take it one more time. How can capacity building and knowledge sharing initiatives on the nationally defined just energy transition pathways ensure that indigenous peoples and local communities are empowered as active partners with their cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and practices recognized, valued, and protected? So with that, we will open the floor for interventions. Please feel free to indicate. And I guess you can use the mics that are closer to you to share your response or perspective to this question. I don't see any requests so far. Yes, please, Colombia.
Thank you, facilitator, for giving me the floor. As Colombia, we would like to talk about an initiative called Escuela de Jota, that in English it would read just Energy Transition School. So we believe that capacity building and knowledge sharing initiatives are most effective when they move beyond a pure technical approach and explicitly recognize the cultural heritage and traditional practices. So this Escuela represents a step in this direction by integrating social dialogue and intercultural exchange into technical training. Rather than simply transferring technology, it creates spaces where communities can articulate their priorities, co-design solutions, and ensure that the transition aligns with their worldviews and livelihoods. This Escuela is designed as a platform that combines training, mentoring, and technical assistance, ensuring that local communities are not passive beneficiaries but active partners in energy transition projects. For indigenous and Afro-descendant communities, this means having direct roles in managing renewable energy projects, such as solar microgrids or efficient cook stoves, strengthening local governance structures and enhancing long-term ownership. By positioning communities at the center of decision-making, the initiative reinforces self-determination while fostering trust in transition policies. There are very important challenges associated with this initiative. For instance, sometimes the capacities that are created in the communities are not permanent, so bigger efforts are needed in order to create the permanent capacities and the governance systems in the communities that allow the initiative to remain over time. So even if we have the institutional framework, that is the case of Escuela J, this practice also can be combined with modern renewable technologies. For instance, community knowledge of local ecosystems can guide the steering of solar or micro hydro projects in ways that minimize environmental disruption and enhance resilience. This integration ensures that transition is strengthened rather than displace cultural heritage. We identify also a challenge regarding scalability of these initiatives because they sometimes are successful within some communities that have stronger social fabric. However, in others, it might be not the same. So the scalability of the project remains a challenge, as well as the long-term implementation, as I mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. Thank you for sharing that. I think if we need further information, we will approach you, especially in the name of the initiative. Thank you very much. Australia.
Hello? Can people hear me? Okay. Yeah. Capacity building and knowledge sharing. They must embed inclusive social dialogue that recognises Indigenous peoples and local communities as decision makers, not just stakeholders. And nationally defined just energy transition pathways, they should also actively value cultural heritage and traditional knowledge and ensuring that these are integrated into planning, governance and implementation. So co-designing projects with Indigenous and local partners can strengthen legitimacy, trust and the durability of outcomes. And Australia is strengthening genuine partnerships with those in our region to advance some of these goals. And we've committed $3 billion in climate finance, period 2020 to 2025, $1.3 billion for our Pacific partners. And capacity building is central to this commitment. We embed climate finance experts throughout finance and the Commonwealth Hub, which supports EG Tuvalu, Vanuatu. And this helps build project pipelines and improve access to multilateral funds. And programs such as the Governance for Resilient Development in the Pacific strengthen fiscal systems, unlocking eligibility for a Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund resources. We're also investing in regional centres, such as SPREP, which is the Secretariat for Pacific Regional Environment Program, and the Pacific Climate Change Centre, which is providing training, research collaboration, and practical knowledge exchange. And embedding First Nations knowledge and perspectives in adaptation strategies further enhances the cultural legitimacy and effectiveness of these efforts. Together with this, regional workforce transition plans and benefits remain important tools to align skills, jobs, and economic opportunities with community priorities. And platforms such as this one, the JTWP Dialogues, can connect these experiences across contexts. So by investing in skills pipelines, participatory governance, and approaches that are culturally grounded, capacity building can ensure no community is left behind, enabling just transition pathways that deliver resilience and enduring benefits for future generations. Thanks.
Thank you, Canada. Thank you for sharing those very useful examples and experiences. I think before we go to Canada, may I ask the technical team in the room if you could work on the mics, but also if we could actually have the mics on the table so they could also use it from the table if it's easier. Is that possible? We will be taking Canada next. Can you pass the mic on the table if possible, so we'll see if that works better. Or if any of the standing ones are working very well, then we can use them.
There we go. I think it works. Yeah. Thank you, facilitator. So yeah, I guess on the first question of this session, Canada would want to jump in to say that genuine partnership with Indigenous peoples is a way of ensuring capacity building and knowledge sharing initiatives are effective and lead to results for the climate, economy, and people. Unpacked, genuine partnership entails engagement across all stages of the policy cycle to ensure meaningful and effective integration of Indigenous values, worldviews, and knowledge systems for initiatives that are relevant. Thank you. For example, governments can co-develop programs, projects, policies, etc., that respect Indigenous laws, cultures, and knowledge systems. Specifically, early engagement and understanding the strategies developed by Indigenous communities are an important first step of this process. Communications are also more effective if they are designed to be culturally appropriate, for example, using Indigenous languages and visual tools, while monitoring and evaluation are most relevant if grounded in Indigenous defined indicators of success and relational approaches such as community-based monitoring and narrative evaluation. Canada emphasizes that Indigenous peoples must be active partners in the clean energy transition, through which cultural heritage and traditional knowledge should be recognized and valued. In Canada, the Sustainable Jobs Partnership Council, which is a tripartite advice-giving body tasked with engaging Canadians and providing advice to the Minister of Natural Resources on action plans for our Sustainable Jobs Act. It includes this partnership includes Indigenous and labor voices and ensures advice to government reflects the lived realities across Canada. Canada also invests directly in Indigenous-led clean energy and skills projects, advancing reconciliation while building capacity for leadership in the transition. And I would just end with that Canada would agree with Australia on the point that was made that this dialogue can work as a better conduit between work within the processes under the UNFCCC process on Indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Thank you for sharing those examples and experiences. We'll now go to Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, facilitator. I'll go just for the first question for now, and I'll come back with the second one. For the first question, developing countries require the skills, knowledge, tools, and frameworks to assess socioeconomic impact of policy options and design just transition pathways consistent with their own needs and priorities. National circumstances mean that pathways, targets, and timeline will differ. Capacity is also needed to evaluate the impact of unilateral trade measures, which has threatened the development perspective of many countries. Without these capacities, developing countries cannot fully design pathways that deliver a climate ambition while advancing developments and protecting livelihood. I'm going to be short here and direct, so I'll come back with the second question. Thank you.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. Thanks for sharing that. We will go to the second question shortly, but we'll have to take Germany before.
To start with, more on a general note, so we think that a whole of society approach to the implementation and development of climate policy should be based on the coordination of policymaking and strengthened operational capacities at all levels and across all relevant policy areas, giving also an active role to regional and local authorities. It should also be based on social dialogue with workers, unions, employers, and governments, as well as robust, early, and broad stakeholder engagement, such as with local communities, indigenous peoples, international organizations, academia, and civil society, including, of course, also the youth. Such coordination and engagement could also ensure that principles of fairness and solidarity are integrated in policy design, implementation, and monitoring from the outset. And we also support for just transition should also be ensured by adopting long-term partnerships and promoting comprehensive approaches to capacity building activities, educational skills exchanges, and training programs to cultivate a skilled workforce, including those enabling greater participation of women and most vulnerable parts of the society. Specifically on the first question, there are of course important sociocultural aspects related to the energy transition. For example, in coal regions, so the phase out of coal across the European Union is essential to combating climate change. However, for coal-dependent regions, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, coal is not just a source of energy, it's also part of their cultural fabric. It's therefore also crucial to find ways to reimagine identities tied to coal extraction to ultimately create an energy transition that encompasses a cultural shift too, together with the most vulnerable people and communities affected by the transition to net zero societies. So the EU also emphasizes the formal recognition and integration of traditional knowledge and cultural heritage into energy transition planning. So energy projects must respect sacred sites, land rights, and traditional livelihoods, integrating environmental and social safeguards. And the EU funding frameworks require social and environmental due diligence, including also consultation processes. The EU also promotes regional and global knowledge sharing platforms, enabling indigenous peoples and local communities to exchange experiences, co-develop solutions, and scale innovations. Initiatives such as global climate adaptation partnerships, UNDP climate knowledge hubs, and EU-led peer learning networks ensure that successful practices are replicable and adapted to diverse contexts, leaving no one behind. Traditional land management, renewable resource stewardships, and sustainable agriculture practices provide critical insights for climate resilient energy systems, and the EU also supports research and innovation programs that integrate these practices into multi-sectoral planning, reinforcing both biodiversity conservation and equitable energy access. I'll just very briefly name few more concrete examples. In our case, for example, the EU Just Transition Knowledge Hub, which provides tangible case studies, toolkits, and catalogs on just transition good practices for practitioners and stakeholders, supporting Europe's just transition to a climate neutral economy. And the hub was established to ensure that all stakeholders in the just transition have easy access to useful, practical, and credible information and knowledge on possible transition pathways and their implications. And in summer 2024, the JTP launched a new online library, the JTP Knowledge Hub, where users can find all knowledge products in one place. And then by the end of 2025, the Commission will launch a European Fair Transition Observatory. It will strengthen the evidence base and promote exchanges of best practices for monitoring and addressing the employment and social impacts of the green transition. It will also foster and include analytical work, data collection, including on the actual impacts of the transition, policy watch and fair transition policies, sharing of best practices, as well as expert advisory groups involving the social partners. And lastly, the European Commission's technical support instrument provides technical support to member states to help them design and implement reforms on the ground, including their territorial just transition plans. For example, the TSI will support the preparation of calls for projects, outreach and communication strategies, capacity building for local and regional authorities, and the dissemination of good practices. I'll stop there to give others to also share their experiences and might, if time allows, also come back on the second question. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. And we will go to Malawi. Would that be a response to the first question or to the second? Okay, so we just transition to that. With Malawi, we transition also into the second question. And just to repeat for those that may have perhaps not been able to see, the second question is asking around what mechanisms or platforms could strengthen the exchange of experiences, skills, and resources to build capacities for just energy transition pathways that reflect diverse local contexts and leave no one behind. Over to you, Malawi.
Hey, thank you so much. Yeah, just some quick points. As the LDC chair also earlier mentioned in plenary, Malawi has very high rates of energy poverty, and I want to just share two examples, one on clean cooking and the other on agriculture. So according to the Energy Progress Report, Malawi has a 2% access to clean cooking, which is pretty low even among the LDCs. So a lot of the majority relies on firewood and charcoal for cooking purposes, and this lack of access to clean cooking is also a very high cause of disease within Malawi. Malawi is also landlocked, which means it faces high costs when importing fuels from abroad. Recently, there has been a pilot program to use schools as an avenue to display the benefits of clean cooking. So in Malawi, school meals represent 70% of all publicly managed food systems and are the second largest consumers of biomass energy after households. So their reach and scale makes them a really powerful entry points for governments to reduce food-related emissions and also improve messaging on the benefits of clean cooking, leading to higher adoption. This obviously also has co-benefits for the communities, especially women and children, who have more time to focus on other things, including education, when they are not searching for firewood or charcoal. The other example from agriculture would be Malawian population, the majority, 80% almost work in agriculture. And these are also mostly small-scale farmers. In recent years, especially due to increasing warming, we've been having increased extreme weather events, which has made agriculture really volatile and unpredictable. In this case, especially in drought-prone areas, solar irrigation and portable solar pumps have been a game changer in promoting food security and also, again, increasing that buy-in at the community level to adopt these clean, renewable technologies. Again, these programs are at a very, very small scale and a lot needs to be done. As Malawi is also, chairing the LDC group, and this is tying into the second question, and I would speak to our mechanism or platform, the JTWP. One thing that we really want to emphasize and have been focusing on within the LDC group is also capacity building on understanding the risks of investments in fossil fuels, especially because there's a sense in countries that have not yet developed fossil fuel infrastructure or have not tapped into their resources that there is an opportunity cost to leaving those fuels in the ground, and that there is a high development cost. As the chair also mentioned earlier, we are seeing that the energy futures are already being powered by renewables, but there is a lot to be done to tackle this messaging on a policy level and also at a community level. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Malawi. Thanks for your intervention. We will go to the virtual participants now, and it will be Panama. And we have Panama.
Armenia. So, knowledge sharing in a just transition.
Just before we have Panama online.
Oh.
Yeah, the technical colleagues, can you Can you connect the virtual participant? Yes. Can we hear now? No, we can't hear you yet.
Oh, I don't know why.
Yes, now. I think we can hear you now.
Now?
Proceed.
Now, yes?
Yes, we can hear you. You can proceed.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Uh, to ensure that capacity building and knowledge sharing initiative within nationally defined just energy transition pathway empower indigenous people and local communities and protect their cultural heritage, they must be based on the principle of co-design, epistemological recognition, respect for local ways of knowing, data sovereignty, and fair benefit sharing arrangement. In practice, this involves legal mechanisms, free, prior, and informed consent, uh, and community protocols, intercultural training modalities, and hybrid platform in person and digital. Yeah, one experience in Panama, we have a school of youth people, how we can interchange and exchange learning with indigenous people, local community, and youth people around the Panama City, and to interchange this knowledge not only in the scientific practice, but because they can have some experience in the field and to understand better how the reality in the intercultural perspective with indigenous people, local community, and all those people. I think that approach to maintain some ceremony as indigenous people, like the ceremony for first tree ceremony and the other ceremony when we can build in a more just transition pathway in the indigenous protocols. Thank you.
Thank you, Panama. Thank you for your intervention. And we will proceed with participants in the room. Can I see the nameplate there?
Armenia, participant from Armenia. Knowledge sharing in just transition is a critical process that ensures all stakeholders, especially workers, communities, policymakers, and businesses, are informed, empowered, and enlightened as societies shift towards more sustainable, low-carbon economies. Role of knowledge sharing in just transition is essential because it ensures that all groups understand the transition process, have access to decision making, can adapt and benefit equally from changes, objective and knowledges, democratize access to information, empower marginalized voices, especially indigenous communities, informal workers, facilitate capacity building, help workers reskill and upskill for new green jobs. Support informed policy making, ensures governments base decisions on shared science and scientific and social data. Encourage innovation. Cross-sector knowledge exchange can drive technological and social solutions. Build trust. Transparent communication between stakeholders reduces resistance and misinformation. So, as for Armenia, Armenia believes that the following guiding principles should underpin the work of the Just Transition work program. First, the work program should support integration of just transition considerations into nationally determined contributions, long-term low-emission development strategies, national adaptation plans, and sustainable development. The principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities must guide both process and substance of just transition efforts. The work program should be science-based and evidence-informed and build on the latest findings from IPCC and others, while also incorporating local and indigenous knowledge. Second, while the work program is a global platform, it must respect nationally determined pathways. Just transition strategies should be integrated into country-driven processes and aligned with national development goals. Armenia is highly committed to people-centered climate transition. We are in the process of updating our NDC to integrate just transition consideration in NDC key sectors. We face a number of challenges, particularly limited fiscal space to fund retraining and job creation and gaps in social protection coverage. We would also like to offer the following suggestions for consideration. First, a key output of the Just Transition Work Program should be the establishment of a technical support tool and guidelines in collaboration with existing institutions, constituencies, and networks such as the Paris Community on Capacity Building, Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage, International Labour Organization, and Santiago Network to help countries, especially developing countries, design and implement just transition pathways. Second, we call for the development of voluntary guidance on just transition indicators and metrics to help parties and stakeholders monitor and report on progress. These indicators should be developed in consultation with party and non-party experts and should remain flexible to account for national circumstances. Third, climate finance providers, including the finance mechanism, should be encouraged to prioritize just transition aspects in mitigation and adaptation investments. This could include funding for social protection schemes, workforce reskilling, and community transition planning. Fourth, Armenia supports the continuation and formalization of the annual high-level Just Transition Dialogue with improved participation from parties, cities and communities, employees, employers, private sector, civil society, and indigenous people. These dialogues should be better integrated into the UNFCCC schedule and be better linked with the relevant climate processes, such as a follow-up, the global stocktake, and NDC submission cycles. Thank you.
Thank you, Armenia, for that intervention. Colleagues, at this point, we just try to ensure that we're able to take as many voices in the room as possible, and we can look in from the nameplates up. We will go to the Women and Gender constituency. Engo, I saw your nameplate up before for the second question. Okay. So Women and Gender constituency, Angle, Canada, and Yongo virtually. This would be our last court for us to be able to maximize the time we have. We're almost out of time. Saudi Arabia, I know you mentioned before. Okay. And I see Egypt as well. It's going to be pretty hard to have all. But then if we can please be very brief so we can be able to take all the parties and stakeholders in the room, and virtually this would be really helpful. If we can do under a minute very quickly. So it would be Women and Gender constituency, Angle, Canada, Yongo, and then Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Right. So Women and Gender constituency.
Thank you. For the Women and Gender constituency, we wish to stress that just energy transition pathways must be rooted in accessible, inclusive, and decolonized forms of knowledge exchange. Too often, technical knowledge and academic framing exclude the most impacted from shaping policies that govern their lives. If capacity building is to be just, it must break down these barriers through translation into local languages, use of community-driven methods of learning, and valuing oral traditions and indigenous storytelling as much as technical reports. We underline that empowering women, girls, and gender-diverse people cannot stop at participation alone. Capacity building must enable them to lead in policy spaces, negotiations, and implementations, not as representatives, but as decision shapers with resources and authority. This requires investing in local women-led organizations, creating mentorship opportunities, scholarships, and supporting feminist knowledge hubs that link community realities with global debates. The Women and Gender constituency emphasizes that just energy transition pathways cannot repeat cycles of extractivism, where Global South is reduced to supplier of critical minerals for the North, with little benefit retained locally. Capacity building must not be limited to one-off consultations or empty promises of job creations. It must mean dedicated and long-term investment in workers, indigenous people, and local communities as true partners in shaping transitions. This requires mechanisms that value and protect cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and local expertise, while also fostering new skills through scholarships, education, and development of industrial capacity within countries. Too often, technology arrives with foreign implementers, leaving local people sidelined and reducing sustainability of projects. Instead, capacity building must ensure that technology transfer is accessible, usable, and adaptable by local communities themselves. We call for platforms that strengthen horizontal exchange between women, youth, indigenous peoples, and workers across regions to share experiences and build solidarity. Participation must be proactive, not symbolic, and must ensure that communities are part of decision making throughout the process, not just as end users. Only then can nationally defined just energy transition pathways be truly just and leaving nobody behind, and ensuring that opportunities for knowledge, resources, and livelihood are equitably shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Menanjenda constituency. Engo, please, if you can keep it very brief.
Thank you, facilitators, and I will keep it brief. As Engo, would just like to re-emphasize the necessity of creating a global platform, which we call the Belém Action Mechanism, where we create a global mechanism to accelerate, consolidate, and achieve a holistic just transition across the whole economy within and between countries. This is primarily for three reasons: to increase coordination, ensuring coherence and complementarity of just transition efforts; implementation support as the second point, ensuring access to technical, financial, and knowledge-based support; and thirdly, knowledge generation, facilitating the sharing of knowledge, experiences, and best practices on key elements concerning just transition. And we do this based from our experiences within the global south of what is currently happening to just transition, with a common policy called the Just Energy Transition Partnerships, which focus on country-to-country agreements, which unfortunately have limited potential transitions and do not speak to the intra-country regional energy interlinkages. Henceforth, we believe a more global mechanism is needed to ensure that the transition is faster and inclusive of all necessary parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Engo. It will now be Canada.
Thank you so much. I'll be really quick here, just to say that we completely agree with a lot of what has been said on this knowledge sharing and peer learning. Armenia spoke well to this on the wealth of experience and knowledge that exists out in the world already, which we in the Just Transition Work Program should be tapping into through these dialogues and better exploring those synergies. So some of the international organizations and initiatives that have been paving the way years in advance of this work program include the International Labor Organization, the IEA People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions Program, which has recently published a blueprint for action on just and inclusive energy transition and is currently finalizing an indicator handbook to complement it. The Powering Past Coal Alliance, the Clean Energy Ministerial Empowering People Initiative, the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency that have recently published a monitoring guide for just transition, as well as an existing guide on stakeholder participation. The Global Energy Transition Forum, IRENA Collaborative Framework on Just and Inclusive Energy Transitions. The multilateral development banks have been doing a lot of work on just transition, including the NDB's Just Transition High-Level Principles. The World Bank has the Just Transition for All initiative and Just Transition Taxonomy, the NDC Partnership, and the UNDP Climate Promise, to name a few. Many of these platforms promote peer learning and knowledge sharing already, helping countries to design their just transition strategies based on the successful models and best practices, and they should be tapped into and better incorporated into the dialogues of the Just Transition Work Program. Thanks.
Thank you, Canada. We go virtually now to have Yongo. Can technical colleagues please get Yongo on the screen?
Hello,
Yes, we can.
can you hear me?
Please proceed.
Thank you, facilitator. I'm Samantha. I'm speaking on behalf of Yongo, the official children and youth constituency. We recommend that capacity building funds should allocate a fixed percentage directly to indigenous and community-led organizations, ensuring that resources flow to those who safeguard cultural heritage and local knowledge. Also, education training programs must be designed to be accessible to workers of all generations, including youth, and provide opportunities for reskilling and integration into sustainable industries. Such programs should be co-developed with affected communities, incorporate indigenous knowledge systems, locally rooted practice, and gender transformative approach so that young people and future generations learn not only technical skills but also values of coexistence with nature. At the same time, community knowledge registers developed with free, prior, and informed consent safeguards are necessary to protect the intellectual property rights of indigenous and traditional practice, preventing the exploitation of territories and guarantee fair benefit sharing. To conclude, this exchange of knowledge carried forward by local communities, women, and youth can strengthen a shift of worldview based on harmony between human being and nature, contributing to a new eco-social contract, the cultural transformation that must guide political and economic decision-making in a just transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Yango. We now go to Saudi Arabia.
Thank you. Thank you, facilitator. So I'm going to be very quick here and direct to the point. So the primary platform for capacity building must remain under the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement, where developed countries have obligation to provide support. We stress the importance of institutional arrangement, such as the one proposed by LMDC Group, Just Transition Technical Assisted Network, which would enable voluntary, bottom-up, nationally determined knowledge sharing and technical support. Attempts to minimize the Just Transition work program undermine its potential. Instead, parties should strengthen it to ensure that diverse local contexts are respected and that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. And now to close us off would be Egypt.
Well, thank you very much for facilitating our session today. I will try to be as brief as possible as well as my colleagues did earlier. I believe that we all agree that just transition is not one pathway, or it encompasses many pathways that would differ according to the national circumstances and the national priorities and the stages of development as well that countries are at, and their capacities as well in responding to the energy transition. So we are talking about two distinctive things: a local or a national just transition pathway, and as I explained earlier, like what are the parameters for identifying this national pathway, and the global just transition that we are talking about, like this is what we are trying to collectively pursue as developed and developing countries as well. So when it comes to the national context, and we agree that the national context has to take into consideration that building the strategy or the pathway for the just transition, it has to follow a bottom-up approach in identifying its priorities and capacities and the level of development and so forth. So and this definitely starts with the capacity building itself, because I mean capacity building and the knowledge sharing and the dialogues all has to engage all the factions of the one society to determine and find the priorities, or how the country would be able to pursue its just transition pathway with that regard. But when it comes on a global level, I mean, this is where the international cooperation and also meeting with the obligations of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement has to come straight into perspective. And it will also feed into supporting the national just transition by providing the financial support necessary even for the capacity building on the national level. So we're talking about two distinct things: the national just transition and the global just transition. And at its core is the international cooperation, and how can the developed countries actually assist the developing countries in identifying first their just transition pathways through the provision of financial obligation towards the developing countries, so that the developing countries can actually determine their own just transition pathways. I'll keep it as short to this, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Egypt, for those remarks to close us off for this particular session. The facilitators would switch sessions. You can stay in the room. The next facilitators will be coming in to drive through a different topic. Thank you so much for your participation, and looking forward to the next section. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Is this thing working? Okay. Good afternoon. I'm here to facilitate the discussion on the discussion theme on climate finance for just energy transition. My name is Fungai. I'm with the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. So I think the time is a bit short, so I'll quickly go to the guiding questions. The first guiding question is, what lessons are being learned on financing nationally defined just energy transition pathways aligned with the outcome of the first global stocktake, including through enhancing access to climate finance, innovative and blended finance, crowding in of the private sector in a way that complements public finance, and financing for social protection? The second question is, what innovative financing mechanisms and policy frameworks could support enhancing the provision of climate finance for transitioning away from fossil fuels in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, in line with national development priorities and while safeguarding affected workers and communities? So those are our two questions. And I'll open the floor for interventions, contributions, sharing of experiences, both online and in the room. Thank you. Okay, we'll start with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Okay, if somebody could share a mic, or you could use this.
Okay, thank you, facilitator, for me starting the break ties in the session. We remain concerned with the framing of these questions, which risk diluting the obligation of developed countries under Article 9 of the Paris Agreement and reinterpreting the just transition in top-down and prescriptive manner. Unilateral measures continue to undermine the predictable and accessible finance. Trade measures in one jurisdictions are projected to cost developing countries $6 billion United States in lost income, while benefiting developed countries by $3 billion, and this widen the gap between North and South global. So private finance cannot substitute for public provision. It doesn't provide conventional finance and doesn't address the growing distress in developing countries. Developed countries must therefore deliver climate finance in highly constitutional and grant-based forms to enable just transition. In the global stocktake, is nationally determined and provides a menu of options, not uniform checklist. Financing just transitions must therefore respect diverse national pathways and support sustainable development and poverty eradication. On innovative finance, we stress that it must begin with the fulfillment of existing obligations. Finance should not create a new debt burden on or impose conditionalities in developing countries. So each party retain the sovereign right to define its own energy mix. Just transitions are holistic in nature, and finance is legal obligations and not bargaining tools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution. If we could have contributions from Colombia.
Thank you so much, facilitator. Can you hear me well? One of the key lessons from the implementation of nationally defined just transition pathways is that the current financial
architecture is not fit for purpose in supporting ambitious climate action in developing countries. A major systemic barrier is the high cost of capital faced by these countries, which limits their ability to invest in climate action, energy transition, and social protection, while also meeting urgent development needs. Colombia, as the second most biodiverse country on the planet and among the most vulnerable to climate change, exemplifies this paradox. Despite strong commitments to phase out fossil fuels and protect nature, it must allocate significant resources to debt servicing, constraining its fiscal space to invest in climate and social priorities. Moreover, the current allocation of climate finance fails to prioritize ambition. Countries like Colombia, ready to lead on climate, are not adequately supported with grants and concessional finance, which disincentivize transformative action. To ensure just, orderly, and equitable transitions aligned with the Paris Agreement, climate finance must be accessible, predictable, and aligned with national development priorities with a strong focus on equity and human rights. High quality, meaning it must be not debt-inducing, avoiding further burdening countries already facing fiscal constraints and high capital costs. It must be based on the recognition of the global value of natural capital and ecosystem services, especially in countries that are critical for biodiversity conservation and climate stability. It must be sufficient in volume and delivered through highly concessional or grant-based instruments, particularly for developing countries providing global public goods such as carbon sinks, ecosystem protection, and climate resilience. So unlocking finance for a just, orderly, and equitable transition away from fossil fuels in developing countries requires not only innovative mechanisms and increased resource flows, but also addressing systemic barriers within the global financial system. Currently, the actions and methodologies of regulators, credit rating agencies, and financial supervisors often increase the cost of capital for developing countries pursuing ambitious climate action. For example, credit rating agencies frequently assign higher risk premiums to developing based on narrow financial indicators, without recognizing the long-term economic stability and global benefits associated with transitioning to low-carbon economies or preserving natural capital. Similarly, financial regulators and supervisors have yet to fully integrate climate considerations into prudential standards, contributing to a risk-averse environment that deters private investment in green sectors. These dynamics make it more expensive and difficult for countries like Colombia, committing to phasing out fossil fuels and protecting biodiversity, to access affordable finance. The result is a climate finance paradox. Those who are most ambitious and most essential to the global transition are often those most penalized by the financial system. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Colombia. If we could have IPO.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the Indigenous Peoples Constituency, and I want to respond to question 2. Regarding that question, we want to express that state parties must ensure direct access to climate finance by Indigenous peoples through their institutions, organizations, including Indigenous-led funds. Finance must prioritize access to renewable energy by Indigenous peoples based on rights protection for social equity and long-term sustainability beyond carbon reduction. Parties must establish exclusion zones for extractive activities in high biodiverse areas such as indigenous territories, and most urgently in the territories of PIASIs, indigenous peoples in isolation. Also, parties must adopt exclusions criteria for financing activities that negatively impact our survival and the conservation of forest and biodiversity, including oil, gas exploitation, mining, infrastructure, mega projects, and extensive agriculture and livestock farming, especially in indigenous territories. And finally, strong regulatory frameworks, including the conduct of human rights due diligence for investors, and ensure their accountability to affected communities, including indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution. If we could have contributions from Germany.
Thank you very much. So let me start by answering the first question as directly as possible. So by briefly sketching the context which we are looking at, which is that according to various sources, the private sector has the potential to deliver up to 60 to 70% of total investments needed to achieving net zero emissions. And in EMDEs alone, excluding China, central and commercial banks, investors, insurers, and asset owners have mechanisms at their disposal to allocate capital for just transition and influence the transition process in the real economy. So actions that contribute to making all finance flows consistent with the transition to net zero and climate resilient societies create opportunities to support a just transition. And according to the IPCC AR6 synthesis report, there's sufficient global capital to close the global investment gaps for a transition toward low GHG emissions and climate resilient development. But there, of course, are also certain barriers to redirect capital to climate action. It also notes that private finance flows for fossil fuels are still greater than those for climate adaptation and mitigation. So moving away from investing into fossil fuel-related assets and aligning financial flows in line with 21C helps to avoid further stranded assets and supports climate-friendly economies via investments into just transition to net zero and climate-resilient societies. Strengthening enabling conditions, policy frameworks, incentives, and investment environments is also crucial to enable the mobilization of finance corresponding to the scale and nature of the socio-economic challenges and considerations related to just transition, especially also to attract private finance investment or private investments, including also from actors currently taking economic advantages from emitting activities. The IPCC pointed out that reducing financing barriers to scaling up financial flows would require clear signaling and support by governments, including a stronger alignment of public finances in order to lower real and perceived regulatory costs and market barriers and risks, and improving the risk-return profile of investments. Governments could promote fiscal, financial, and regulatory frameworks aimed at reducing the cost of capital and facilitating a just and equitable net zero transition, as well as incentivize credit enhancement programs such as insurance mechanisms, guarantees, and other blended finance approaches. Finance ministries can play a crucial role in mobilizing public and private financial resources, allocating investment and expenditures, developing sound macroeconomic forecasts and policies, designing measures to mitigate potentially adverse distributional impacts of climate policies, and aligning NDC planning with national development planning and budget cycles. Fiscal tools are also a strong economic instrument to achieve solidarity in emissions reductions, as they can tackle the most emitting activities while providing midterm revenues that can be used to provide financial support to the most vulnerable people to invest in those activities or sectors that might accompany their transition and that might be less financially appealing currently. On the second question, the EU experience shows that carbon pricing and emissions trading systems can provide sustainable revenue streams to finance just transitions. The EU emissions trading system generates resources that can be reinvested in worker reskilling, clean energy infrastructure, and community development. And the OECD emphasizes that carbon pricing is one of the most effective ways to align national financial flows with climate objectives while also supporting equity and economic efficiency. Another example, green and transition bonds provide scalable financing for clean energy infrastructure and social transition measures, and the EU Green Bond Standard, aligned with the EU taxonomy for sustainable activities, ensures that investments contribute to environmental objectives and social safeguards. Of course, MDBs, including also the European Investment Bank and World Bank, actively promote climate-aligned bonds to channel private capital to sustainable energy projects globally, and the EU NECP, that is the National Energy and Climate Plans, require member states to align climate action, energy security, and socioeconomic priorities. Similarly, MDBs and also the UNFCCC Standing Committee on Finance emphasize that Korean policy frameworks covering also regulation, subsidies, and fiscal incentives unlock both domestic and international climate finance while ensuring development coherence. And lastly, guarantees, insurance, and risk mitigation instruments are also crucial to attract private investment in regions exposed to economic, climatic, and geopolitical risk. the World Bank's partial risk guarantees, the OECD's risk sharing frameworks, and the EU-backed financial instruments reduce investor risk while ensuring that projects benefit both workers and communities. I could also go into depth of EU examples. I will refrain from that. One primary example would be the Social Climate Fund, but if there's interest, I can come back to that later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your submission. If we could have Engo giving us their submission.
Thank you, facilitator, for the opportunity to comment on this very important topic. I think my submission will focus primarily on the first question, but I'll try my best to limit it to that. Would like to re-emphasize what has been said by some parties here around...
Sorry, can you get closer to the mic? We are struggling to hear you.
Is this better?
Far much better.
Okay, so it was Engo. Okay. So would like to re-emphasize the need for debt cancellation, especially for developing countries, when it comes to issues of financing, which is limiting the potential public finance support coming from within developing countries. And would also like to speak beyond a common growing narrative that carbon markets can be a potential financing system. From the global south, we believe that there's a real danger of the financialization of nature, with communities facing the brunt of the systems without tangible benefit from the foresaid carbon markets. Also, we'd like to speak quite strongly around this issue of private financing and what it has not meant for a lot of the developing countries. In 23 to 2024, we reached only 38% of the global annual investment needed for a just energy transition. Just 15% of this went to the global majority living outside of the global north and China. And we've also seen from our research that blended finance is the primary solution posed to fill this finance gap. But new data set shows that each dollar of this subsidized public finance is delivering 4 to 7 times less private finance for energy transition in the global south than major modeling and policy systems are setting out. These unrealistic assumptions drive an estimated 33% shortfall in energy transition finance, and by 2030, for the global south to reach their 1.5 degrees Celsius, we feel that the shortfall will carry on because of the focus of private on private finance. My apologies. Henceforth, there's a need for public finance to take the lead. As we all know, the renewable energy revolution that we're experiencing around us and in practice has been led by public finance in both global north and global south countries. And lastly, speaking beyond the private sector-led narrative, in line with the bottom-up approach that we are speaking about within the Just Transition Work Program, we believe it is important to include the potential of cooperatives, social enterprises as means of ownership, organization, and raising finance in the Just Transition. Over 400 million people are already involved in these systems, not only the global south, but also in the global north. And it is important for us to recognize this work as part of the potential of the Just Transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take this opportunity to close this session and kindly request that you make your submissions. You make your submissions online so that your submissions are also taken on board, and we need to bring this session to a close because I think all the people who had an intention to speak have already spoken. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
It looks like we have power in terms of mic. Okay. Hello, everyone. There's a bit of an echo. Right, I think we are going to live with the echo. So we are here for the final session. We are going to just set up in a moment the online participation before we turn to the discussion. So while we get set up, let me give you a quick reminder of the topic, which is innovation and technology transfer, and the two questions that we have at hand. The first is, how can innovation and technology transfer foster holistic and multi-sectoral approaches to just energy transition pathways that leaves no one behind, including through inclusive innovation, local knowledge integration, and identification of scalable solutions? And the second question is, how can innovation and technology transfer best support the implementation of nationally defined just energy transition pathways, including through energy efficiency, clean cooking solutions, scaling of renewable energy, and enhancing energy access? And again, I would invite you and the participants online to address both questions together or focus on one of them, but also potentially to react and have a conversation among you participants. Let me just check how we are with the online participation, but I think we are good to go. So let me open the floor for interventions. We're going to wrap up quite quickly. No, you see Germany. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you. I didn't mean to keep you from doing other stuff. Sorry. Bear with me. So maybe to start with a few general remarks, accelerating the implementation of climate technology requires, in our perspective, changes in the social systems, so knowledge, behavior, institutions, and markets. And creating enabling environments for technology development and transfer involves processes that are embedded in differing social, economic, and development contexts. The development of green product standards and the tracking of the transition towards low and zero emission products is an important indicator. And the harmonized reporting on low and zero emission products, for example, for steel and cement, will allow the tracking towards a zero carbon economy and the deployment of zero emission technologies. The TEC and the CTCN observe the experience sharing and capacity building collaboration between countries can stimulate the uptake of climate technologies in collaborating countries, and a concrete example of bundling climate technology knowledge and experience is that of technology roadmaps guiding the transition to zero emission sectoral solutions. An important part of such roadmaps is the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy solutions based on internationally gathered good practice of planning and implementing. On the first guiding question, the EU emphasizes inclusive innovation, where technology development actively involves local communities, workers, SMEs, and civil society. Programs under Horizon Europe, for example, encourage co-design of renewable energy systems, smart grids, and energy efficiency solutions to reflect local needs, social realities, and cultural context, ensuring that no one is left behind. Just energy transitions must connect energy, water, agriculture, transport, and the industry sectors, and EU backed programs such as Horizon Europe missions, that is climate neutral and smart cities, clean energy transition, demonstrate how energy innovations can drive cross-sectoral benefits from clean mobility to efficient heating, reducing social and environmental trade-offs. Innovation must also prioritize scalability and adaptability, enabling solutions developed in one region to be tailored to diverse national and local contexts. Examples include modular solar and mini-grid systems in rural areas, smart energy management platforms, and hybrid renewable storage systems supported by EU technical assistance via the ELENA program and Covenant of Mayors programs. Technology alone is, of course, not enough, so the EU also stresses the integration of local knowledge, indigenous practices, and community expertise into design, deployment, and operation. And this approach also ensures social acceptance, efficiency, and resilience, aligning also with the ILO guidelines on just transitions and UNDP guidance on participatory innovation. Successful technology adoption requires also partnerships between government, private sector, academia, and local communities, and EU-funded PPPs demonstrate also how research institutions, local SMEs, and citizen cooperatives can collaborate to co-develop affordable, clean, and resilient energy solutions, ensuring both economic and social benefits. Innovation and technology transfer must also include robust monitoring, impact assessment, and adaptive learning, and the EU programs incorporate metrics for social inclusion, environmental sustainability, and economic impact, ensuring also that scaling does not compromise equity. Very briefly on the second question, we emphasize also that the innovation in energy efficiency technologies, so again, smart grids, building retrofits, and industrial policy, industrial process optimization can significantly reduce emissions and energy demand. I've mentioned several programs there with whom the EU supports scalable, cost-effective solutions that lower also energy costs for households and businesses, and innovative solutions for clean cooking are also critical for public health, gender equality, and climate mitigation. And the EU supports blended finance, PPPs, and capacity building programs to deploy these solutions at scale, ensuring also that affordable access for vulnerable communities is given. And lastly, the EU programs also integrate robust monitoring. I've touched upon that in the first question, and knowledge exchange to assess the effectiveness of technology deployment, enabling also lessons learned to be replicated across regions and sectors. Thank you.
Many thanks for that intervention. And I think we have Australia here in the room. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Facilitator. In the interest of time, I'll look to weave in both questions through this response. And just quickly up front, I think it's worth stating that the decision establishing our work program includes pathways to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement, just and equitable transition, opportunities, challenges, barriers, approaches to enhancing adaptation, just transition of the workforce, and so on. But it doesn't explicitly include technology and innovation. So I think it's important for us to look at what we have within the UNFCCC architecture and what may be leveraged here. And I speak to things like the tech, which embeds just transition through policy tools like its TNE guidebook, emphasizing inclusion in renewable energy planning, and the CTCN weaves just transition strategies into its technology support via its TT Clear platform, aiding inclusive, equitable energy transitions. But innovation and technology are in fact key to advancing just transition pathways. And if I can touch on a national experience, the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, or ARENA, funds and supports innovative renewable energy projects, and this drives technology development, commercialization, and knowledge sharing to accelerate our transition to affordable, reliable, sustainable, clean energy. And what's important here is these local pilot programs, similar to those led by ARENA, they can demonstrate scalable solutions to things like renewable energy, energy efficiency, and clean cooking. At the same time, active participation and consent of Indigenous peoples, women, youth, and affected communities are essential for these equitable outcomes. Sharing experiences through these dialogues can help spread these practical approaches to things like reskilling, deploying new technologies, while also integrating local knowledge. But this innovation must be underpinned by sustainability-related skills pipelines, ensuring local actors can absorb and apply these new technologies. Australia's approach also embeds First Nations knowledge and perspectives for these strategies, and blended finance tools can also support innovative low emissions technologies by de-risking projects and attracting private capital. And just finally, technology cooperation should therefore support our national plans, making transitions affordable, accessible and equitable while enhancing energy access, improving health and advancing environmental co-benefits. And combining these things together with inclusive innovation, these just transition pathways can strengthen resilience, empower our communities and deliver scalable solutions that leave no one behind. Thank you.
Many thanks for that intervention. And I think I see Engo here in the room. Engo, you have the floor.
My apologies, dear facilitator. I just lost my notes for 2 seconds. I think I found them now. Okay, fantastic. Thank you again, facilitator, for the opportunity to speak on this topic. Like the previous party, I'll just bundle my response to focus on both questions. On the point of technology transfer, access to intellectual property rights in environmentally sound technologies could facilitate a strengthening of industrial capacities in countries in dire need of economic diversification options. For this, we believe as Engo that waivers on agreed upon key climate change related technologies should be supported through the Just Transition Work Program or other global platforms where technology transfer issues are discussed. Initiatives taken at the UNFCCC process could accelerate the pace of technology transfer or sharing and building a more cooperative rather than competitive environment for climate action, job creation, and prosperity. This will require addressing the concentration of intellectual property ownership and geopolitical leverage exercised through technology monopolies, which currently constrain access to climate-linked innovations and technological development in the Global South. Technology transfer in the Just Transition Work Program process must present the broadness of different types of just transition raised, what the question defines as a multi-sectoral support. Examples of technology transfer or sharings that we think should also be included beyond what was presented earlier on, issues around mineral, metal, and material processing that increases the efficiency and quality of mining activities in producer countries for critical energy transition minerals, energy efficiency technologies that have already been mentioned in this dialogue, but we'll like to provide an example of how LED lights have led to at least 40% savings in expenditure in Southern Africa region. Henceforth, there is a need to really emphasize as much as possible the importance of technology sharing around energy efficiency, as well as the smart grid technology systems that enable management of renewable energy systems and the grid systems that are developing within the Global South. Thank you.
Many thanks for that intervention. And now we have Saudi Arabia. You have the floor.
Thank you, facilitator. So I'll be quick here. So in the first questions, developing countries must be adequately supported to build their capacity to develop, deploy, and disseminate climate technologies that are relevant to their own circumstances. That requires financial, technical, and capacity building support, as well as the removal of barriers such as restrictive intellectual property regimes. Waiving such rights would allow developing countries to increase their ambition and mitigation while ensuring sustainable development and economic co-benefits. The upcoming technology implementation program is an important opportunity to strengthen the linkages between the technology and financial mechanism to deliver concrete implementation. So in the second question, the just transition pathways must respect national sovereignty and include the full range of technologies that parties determine for themselves, including carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So the real barriers is not innovation itself, but the intellectual property rules that exclude developing countries. Developed countries must therefore fulfill their obligation to make technologies accessible, affordable, and free of restrictive patents, while also supporting local manufacturing and industrialization in the global south. Support for clean cooking solution is important, but must be complemented by broader measures to expand energy access, enhance affordabilities, and develop CCUS infrastructure as part of the holistic and nationally defined approach to emission abatements. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention. And I believe now we have Canada. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, facilitator, and Saudi Arabia for passing the mic. Yeah, Canada would just like to speak to, I guess, both questions at the same time here. And we would note that technology transfer, including that in support of the transition of the energy sector and the workforce, should be supported by a thorough understanding of domestic needs and circumstances to identify the right technologies, as well as the barriers to successful implementation. So it's for this reason that parties are encouraged to undertake technology needs assessments to support their NDCs, as well as using the NAPS process to identify technology options for adaptation responses. And as highlighted by the Technology Executive Committee's 2023 report entitled Technology and NDCs, Stimulating the Uptake of Technologies in Support of NDC Implementation, the successful uptake of technology requires approaches that are gender responsive, inclusive, participatory, and equitable, and consider the needs, priorities, knowledge, and capacities of all technology stakeholders and partners, including Indigenous peoples. They should also generate awareness of technology benefits and foster stakeholder engagement and the buy-in regarding processes and technologies. So any strategies that are taken by international partners, both private and public, should make efforts to tackle these barriers and create the enabling environments and build the capacity needed to ensure the successful and sustainable technology uptake. Ultimately, it's important that technology transfer can work as an enhancer of the implementation of just transition for workers and communities, Indigenous peoples, and women and girls to ensure more equal distributions of benefits and risks across societies. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And now we have IPO, and that could be the last intervention. You have the floor.
Thank you, facilitator. As we discuss innovation and technology transfer in the context of a just energy transition pathways, we emphasize that true innovation must serve people and the planet, not profit and pollution. For Indigenous peoples, innovation must be inclusive, respectful of our rights, and grounded in a holistic and multi-sectoral approaches that leave no one behind. To answer the questions posed, first, we call on parties to foster inclusive innovation that integrates indigenous knowledge systems alongside scientific and technical solutions. Our ways of understanding land, water, and energy are based on thousands of years of stewardship and adaptation, and innovation must respect this knowledge, not override or erase it. Technology must also prioritize our ownership and respect of our rights, especially for decentralized renewable energy systems like mini-grids, solar, and micro-hydro, to ensure long-term sustainability and not converting indigenous lands into sacrifice zones. In that sense, we must avoid techno-fixes that cause new harms, like displacing communities, destroying ecosystems, or erasing cultural heritage in the name of green progress. Innovation must be equitable, ethical, and indigenous-led. Finally, we want to emphasize that the urgent need to rethink the dependency on critical minerals. We must promote recycling, reuse, circular economy, innovation in alternative materials to reduce extractive pressures on indigenous territories, A just transition cannot rely on expanding mining at the expense of our lands and futures. Thank you.
Many thanks for that intervention. We are just now keeping an eye if there is any final word from online participants or the room. Yes. Women and gender constituency, and I would kindly invite if there is any final ones, yes, to keep short interventions because we are about to wrap up. Women and gender constituency, you have the floor online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Facilitator, and I will keep it very brief. We just want to start by stating that we align ourselves with the intervention made by our comrades from the Engo constituency, and we also wanted to bring up the point of intellectual property law specifically and how that is blocking just transition and climate justice. Many renewable energy, clean tech, and adaptation solutions are patented by many developed countries, making them expensive or inaccessible for developing countries that need them the most. Wealthy countries and corporations hold most patents, while poorer countries face barriers to using or producing these technologies, reinforcing global north-south divides. A just transition requires rapid scaling up of clean technologies, but intellectual property restrictions limit how quickly they can spread globally. IP laws prioritize profit and ownership over collective equitable access to climate solutions, contradicting the principles of climate justice. In short, IP laws protect corporate profits but slow down the sharing of life-saving green technologies, making the transition less fair and more unequal. Thank you, Facilitator.
Thank you very much for that contribution and intervention. And I think we are about 2 minutes to go. So any final thoughts, or if not, we are gonna wrap this session here. Thanks. So that's a wrap. Thanks again for the willingness and the last push of energy in these sessions. So there is considering that we are quite late into the evening and we have to free the building rather soon. We are gonna have reflections and report back tomorrow in the plenary, and we're gonna start sharp at 9 o'clock. People will also get an opportunity to share their interventions in case they were not able to contribute during some technical issues during today's discussion. So I think we are good to go. Again, thank you so much for the contributions today, and I wish you a very good evening.